So I just wanted to talk about Adderall and my experiences on it. I'd say it's probably the most diabolical medication you could ever go on, and it could just ruin your life. Now, it does this in like a really deceptive way because at first it seems like it's helping. If you have ADHD, feels like you can focus, like you have energy, like you can get out of bed, and that'll last for like a little while. But then you start to just notice the way you think is a little different. And that alone, it's tough to put your finger on, but your reaction to certain events, your decisions, your relationships, the way you think about all sorts of things is going to change, and not necessarily in a good way. And that's what makes it so dangerous, is it's hard to quantify. But I would say in general, Adderall, Vyvanse, all of those are going to have a net negative on your life. Now, you might think it's doing good, and that's how you get trapped. But when you look back, you'll just realize, like, wow, that was very intense. It's a lot like other drugs, like weed, where people are like, oh, it's not so serious. But then after they've been on it for a while, they realize, like, wow, it actually has a huge effect on your life when you zoom out a little bit. So with Adderall, oof, I would say it definitely screwed my life up a lot. And I'm still struggling on it. I have to quit it once again very soon. I'm not ready yet because there's quite the withdrawals are pretty intense and you get really emotional, which is also part of the danger of Adderall because it stabilizes your emotions. And it's not really talked about that much. And I'm surprised they actually prescribe it to children like in school. Like pretty young ages are getting put on Adderall before they've even discovered their personality. And I actually recently saw an article that was saying that Britney Spears said her preferred drug was Adderall and that she was struggling with that and trying to quit it. And I just thought, wow, this is like one of the richest people in the world. And she has access to all sorts of drugs, all sorts of traveling, all these amazing things. And she struggles with Adderall, just like any normal American. That's how powerful it is. Like, she's been exposed to everything. And Adderall is the one that actually messed her up the most, possibly. And it's understandable. She's probably pretty isolated, hanging out in her own little world. Adderall will really isolate you. And I remember hearing once that the One Ring in Lord of the Rings was an allegory for methamphetamine, and that's what Gollum was supposed to signify. Was once he started holding the ring, this would be like an allegory for amphetamines. He sort of disappears from the world. He betrays people. He becomes invisible. And that's how you start to feel on Adderall. Because you can be social on it, it kind of messes up your desire to go and socialize. And it also, I would say, amplifies your addictive tendencies. Say if you have an issue with gaming, you're going to want to game a lot on Adderall. Or if you're really like a workaholic, Adderall will make that much more intense. And then after you've been on it for a while and you're basically kind of a different person on Adderall, not super different, but just enough to mess with your decision making. And that's where it also reminds me of alcohol. Because alcohol, when people become an alcoholic, their decision making after them drinking for a while, their prefrontal cortex gets messed up a little bit. So their decision making's kind of screwed up. So they can't really come to the decision to quit very easily because they're not thinking straight. It's the same thing with Adderall. It changes the way you think. And so suddenly, like 3 years later, you're just thinking back and realizing like, wow, that was really not a good idea. But that's the real danger and the real tragedy of it, because those are 3 years you're not going to get back. And you could have made mistakes, or you could have had a lot of good things happen, and you'll never really know what would have been different. And you can go ahead, like, basically you can have a very functional life on Adderall and still have a lot of things going wrong or badly because of it. And it's not until it's over, they'll say 3 years, that you're not going to get back. You realize, like, wait a minute, it was a bit twisted. And that's also what kind of reminds me of the Lord of the Rings and the One Ring, because people are like, oh, you can use the One Ring to do all these great things, and everyone has to explain, like, no, like, whatever you try to do is going to go wrong because the ring itself is negative. And that's with Adderall. It's energy, but it's very negative energy, which can sound pretty esoteric, but there's a lot of truth to it, like the positive and the negative vibrations. Essentially, you're going to have a lot of energy on Adderall, but you're not going to be happy. You'll be aroused. But it's different than actual happiness. You're like very energetically irritated, if that makes sense. So you'll be able to get all these things done and be all productive or socialize, but there's an edginess to it. You'll be kind of like grumpy. And it doesn't feel good, but at the same time, it doesn't feel bad. And it really dampens, say, like depression and sadness. So that's where it becomes really hard to go off of Adderall, because you want to get off of it. And so when you start to, you go through the withdrawals, and suddenly you start to feel, the emotional burden of what you had gone through. Say if you really messed up your life on Adderall and you try to go off of it, you're stuck with the withdrawals, which is like a huge chemical imbalance in your brain. It has to, get all the dopamine and serotonin receptors, everything, all the little neurochemicals all balanced again. And so your brain's going to be just in a really, really sad, depressed, negative state while you're trying to quit. And then your thoughts are going to try to rationalize this feeling in your brain. And it can be pretty overwhelming. A lot of people are just going to go right back on it to get away from the withdrawals so they can be productive again. And so, yeah, it is dangerous. I would not recommend Adderall. If you have ADHD, the tragedy of ADHD is it just sucks. Adderall can help with ADHD, but it's really negative. And so it's just one of those things. You just have to try to live your life with ADHD and accept that it is a handicap, and you're not going to get like government assistance. There's not going to be much sympathy in the world for someone with ADHD, and they'll probably just be like, oh, go get your medication. But literally every medication for ADHD pretty much sucks. And yeah, that's just the truth. Just like most mental illness, there's a lot of cope with all sorts of them, and it's just sort of inescapable. Like it's tough. Your life's gonna be a little bit harder, and you just have to sort of accept that. Because with the Adderall, like I said, you might be able to function a bit better, but you don't get to be happy. It's like negative energy, like this weird dark fuel, and you're gonna make some interesting decisions on it, and it could impact your relationships a little bit, because like I said, you're not exactly happy while you're on it, and you might be searching for that happiness, and for that reason, and not really understanding, this little prescription drug that's totally illegal that you're taking is really messing with your hormones and the balance in your brain. And so I would definitely recommend don't go on Adderall. Or if you do, be ready to cycle it on and off. Maybe take it for a month and then kind of get off of it and see how you feel about how you were while you're on it versus how you are when you're off of it. Possibly just use it when you need to study for tests and stuff, and then go off it. Because when you're on it, for prolonged periods of time, if you have Adderall extended release and you just take it every single morning, like I have, yeah, it messes with you. It is pretty bad. Yeah, and it's just pretty wild. Just normal things don't really make you that happy while you're on it like they used to. Looking at natural scenery and stuff and just chilling. You can't just chill on Adderall, and it's hard to describe. You're just not relaxed. You're just kind of energetic. But yeah, I will Talk to you later.